I mean, because the gals feel the pressure. Believe me. Believe you me. You don't have a fucking clue. And I laugh when I ask the question, are they going to be supportive? You don't know what fucking support is. When you miss their birthday, most of you are through right there. Because you didn't explain it to them. Do you know what support really means, sweetheart? I'm not going to be here very much. I'm going to miss the kids' soccer shit. Because you really think it's shit, unless you're trying to live vicariously through your kids, which most of you are. I'm going to maybe miss our anniversary. Anniversaries I like the best to miss. Because they don't mean cock, you know. Christmas, whatever. Ramadan, which is a whole month. It's tough to miss all of Ramadan, but anyway. But if you ask the average Saudi if he wants to spend a month in London, as opposed, well, then they normally say yes. They don't say no. Okay, what's the takeaway about him?
He started immediately.
Immediately. And Deb said in the first day, once I'm not there for the support, and Dr. Joe said the same thing. Once I'm not there for the support, even though I don't consider this real support, other than you're in a room that's, generally speaking, they want the same thing. They want to, create a much, much, much better life for themselves and their family. That's generally speaking everybody in the room. Yeah. Occasionally we get a wacko like the wacko we tossed out. The police came and drug out. But occasionally, and we haven't. He's not the first one the police drug out. But I mean, since we've been filming it, he's the first one that the police drug out. But I mean, he's headlong. I mean, and he's gone around. And as I told you when we were talking about South Africa, there's a lot of goddamn businesses. I mean, they got no succession. In fact, I think the average age of the 5 businesses he's buying right now is 65 plus. Yes, sir.
He was going into multiple industries.
Yeah, he's building a conglomerate. He's not rolling up one. Because just as I told you, there's so much shit. It's like birds' nests on the ground. I mean, there's so many different things for sale there, or potentially for sale. I said a conglomerate, and he went back and he says, God, there's a lot of stuff for sale. And we had a guy from the flight school that he's buying that was trained as a pilot in the audience in that group that was watching him. He thought that guy would never sell. And he says, so he thought, but he did sell, or he is in the process of selling. And you heard non-recourse money. I mean, if you don't ask, he says, like he said, I would have never known, I would have never asked, But if you don't ask, they don't volunteer non-recourse money. They just don't. And almost all non-recourse money is associated with International Monetary Fund, World Bank, blah, 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 those big institutions, NATO, etc. But there's a lot of funds in the African continent. And even though South Africa doesn't consider it a third world country, by the regular standards, it is. Yes, sir.
So when you have multiple industries that you're rolling up and buying and doing acquisitions of, how does that affect the board you have? Okay, it's a good question.
A couple others have asked the same thing. You need generalists. You need transaction junkies like me that have been in all kind of different industries, and you have experience across the board from A to Z. I mean, across the board, and they're available. And normally, but I told him his 8th or 9th acquisition is going to be a bank. And then when you buy a bank, it's like a motherfucking slot machine that has 7s across every time. Boom, boom, boom. And he'll buy a bank. And he didn't even think about buying a bank. I mean, before he came here, I mean, well, probably nobody in this room has ever thought about buying a bank. I mean, a bank. I mean, and they're possible because there are independent banks that were started 40, 50 years ago. We had the daughter or the granddaughter of the founder of Texas Commerce Bank here, that ultimately became Citibank years ago. And they talked about, he says he talks about a guy who pulled $88 million out of the bank. That guy was me. And I called him up in Houston and said, as you speak, we're loading up a Brinks car to the fucking downtown branch, and I want my money. I want my fucking money. Because he gave us shit service. He wasn't giving us any service. And he mentioned most of you have deposit relationships. You deposit money in the bank. They may or may give you some minimal service. And that's not the way it's supposed to work. And when he's talking about interviewing banks, and when you get the scripts, and we're going to do some interviews here by webinar, one of which is Josh is going to do via a webinar, the relationship will never be the same. And it's fun to go back to the bank, because the bank you're doing business with now is probably not going to be the bank you go do business in the future, because they're set in their ways about how they look at you. But to go back and interview that bank after you get some practice, slapping the bankers around, metaphorically speaking, slapping them around, then go back to your bank and then fucking kick them good. And I mean, they come back and I get emails to Kim. The banker was perspiring. I mean, drops of sweat were falling in the lenses of his glasses. He had to take a break. There's another question. Yeah.
I have a follow-up question.
Sure.
So when you're looking for a generalist who's a transaction junkie, what kind of questions should we ask?
Well, the questions you ask, instead of in healthcare, I mean, you just put it in, we're building a conglomerate. How many acquisitions across the board have you made, et cetera? And I used to ask them what industries what industries were your favorite? What were the most, Sally would say, the most fun? And they'll tell you, but when you're asking these questions of these potential board members, nobody's, other than maybe one of you has interviewed him 5 years ago, or he's already on one of the boards. I mean, nobody's ever asked the questions of him. What industry did you have the most fun in? And almost all the old time guys will say the 80s. When you ask them, because the 80s was fun. It was like a pinball machine, and everything it hit paid off. I mean, back in the 80s. But I never thought I'd see it again. It's easier now to get money than it was then. And remember, interest rates were twice as high. At least, minimum, they were twice as high back in those days. And they were still doing deals. And now they're half as much. And the more money they get out on legitimate loans, the more bonuses they make. And I mean, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. Another question about, yeah, okay. But Anelli, he's 38 years old. South Africa, he's black, which doesn't, it doesn't make any difference, but he is. And you saw how he's got his 6 and 9 year old. But, and I told him the 9-year-old is a little late already. But he's always been a little Hitler, so I mean, it's maybe not too late. That's his disposition anyway. For those of you that have little Hitler or little Al Capones, that's your disposition, then it's easier to pull back on the throttle. But in the theory of release your brakes, which I had the fortune of having as a mentor who wrote the book, who invented Comfort Zone, most of us go through life with our emergency brake on. For those of you that are old enough, you remember that you had to take the emergency brake off to drive the car. Now, when you put it from, I haven't done this, they tell me, Sally says, when you go from park to drive, the emergency brake goes off. Okay? Well, back in the old days, you had to release the emergency brake. And for those of you that have driven old cars, you know that. Well, you drive along for a while, and you hear it's bad for the carburetor, the differential, the universal joints, the tire, everything. Then when you release the emergency brake, you go like in the warp speed, whoo, right? Well, most of us are going through life with our emergency brake on. And even though Anelli has been successful, he still had his emergency brake on because he thought, no debt. You know, he's not the only one. Some of you in this room have run your life, no debt. But when he's gone back to the financial institutions with the template, he didn't have it. You know, some of the guys will write it on your hand. You know, the 5 or 6 words, and you'll memorize those words and whether they're associated to the questions you ask. Don't turn your hand around. You know, and when you shake hands with a guy and your hand's wet, write it on the hand you're not going to shake hands with, so he doesn't. Well, how did I get this ink on my hand? You know. But he took it seriously, but default's a bitch. He said default's a bitch. Deb said default's a bitch. Joe said default's a bitch. Dr. Joe. Frank said default's a bitch. Guess what? Success and default leave clues. Default's a bitch. But I mean, he's doing very well, and he's pushing like hard, like a jockey to the finish line to get all 5. And now there's a 6th deal that's come up before the year end, and he's going to the whip, you know, like a jockey. He's going to the whip to drive, and but these deals aren't cross-collateralized, because you're going to come back on an email. I got 3 deals. I got 11 deals. I got 52 deals. I want to do all at once. Okay. Well, first of all, that's very rarely possible. But you got 3 deals, and with the same bank you're going to go to because you get lazy and it's easier, and they're going to want to cross-collateralize all the fucking deals. Meaning deal 1 collateralizes deal 2, deal 2 does 3, and 3 does all of them, okay? Then 1 falls to shit. Okay, where's the new collateral?
The other 2 deals.
Yeah, well, no, they want additional because they already had a bunch of collateral. Now they lost. Oh, and so either if you're going to do deals simultaneously, you can't cross-collateralize them because one of them will fall out for sure. You can't cross-collateralize them, although it's easier to cross-collateralize, you know. And we as a race, Homo sapien, are looking for the easiest way to get these deals done. And the process that you follow isn't the easiest, but it's the most effective. It's the most effective. Motivated seller, getting your bank on its back foot, meaning off balance by you taking a positive offensive posture, and not in an offensive way. I mean, I used to do it, they tell me, in an offensive way because I used to get, you know, real aggressive. Don't waste my fucking time, yes or no. And, you know, and there's still people alive around that remember that. And occasionally you're going to bump into one. New York City, Dallas, Houston, London, Los Angeles, Chicago. There are still guys at the very tops of banks that remember me. And I thought he was dead. He should be dead. Because, you know, yes or no? God damn it. Don't jerk me around. Time's money. And but other than those guys that you bump into from time to time, and you're going to bump into when you're searching for lawyers and accountants, and now these guys are very senior. Oh, he taught me a lesson when I was a young lawyer right out of law school. Boy, he peeled me like a fucking banana. He used to have a saying, beat him like a rented mule. I don't know if he's still alive. He's probably still saying that, which I do. I beat him like a goddamn rented mule. But even now, the bankers and the lawyers and the accountants, they're in a service business. The operative word is service, to give to you, which you heretofore have not received. They're in a service business. And you can go to any $2,000 an hour law firm and get the same fucking service. And that's what they charge now, you know, roughly. The senior guys, very senior guys. And, you know, and that's about $1,900 more than you feel comfortable paying. You know? And now you know why your dad and your uncles and everybody always said lawyers are whores, you know? And anything else about Anelli?
Yeah,
yes, sir.
He did all kinds of crazy stuff. He was getting manicures and pedicures and jumping out.
Yeah, correct. And he and I are going to jump on some great whites in January.
Is he the one that wants to ride the shark?
Yeah, we're gonna ride him to glory. And I already know because I've done it one time before. they hardly even, I mean, at 225, 230 pounds, they got to feel it when I flop on their back. But my experience is he wiggled, just like I wasn't there. And he had but anyway, Allah, praise Allah, nothing happened to me. So if anybody gets hurt in this deal, it'll be him, not me. I assure you, if anybody gets eaten in half, it'll be him. He's going to have that big white's going to have a black hors d'oeuvre, and it'll be him. He ain't eating any white man, which is me. I guarantee it. That I can assure you. So don't worry about your mentor program ending in January because I get killed by some great white shark. But he did a lot of things because he thought he was a tough guy. He thought he was a tough guy. And he says, I find out what a wimp I am. He's not a tough guy. And but I mean, the countries that I've already mentioned, they're just opportunities like crazy. Like crazy. The one guy that asked the question, why did you feel that this was necessary? The PhD Muslim who lived in Riyadh for 16 years, who's now gone back to Riyadh to operate in NEOM, which is the new Saudi joint venture with Jordan and Egypt. And the guy that became famous from throwing that punch, that's on my social media. Then after he left, he said, "Fuck, that was a stupid question I asked him, because now I realize what it's like when you leave." And that's why the most important call you make in the beginning, or contact you make, is your chairman. Because that person, that gal, and we have a lot of gal chairmen now, I'm proud to say, makes the rest of the board easier, not easy, but easier. And we have 4, 5, 6 people out there in the world that when you look at this industry, there's 3 or 4 people that are known in the industry. The kids have them as their chairpersons.
Does targeting a diverse race and cultural background help with the board?
Say it again, please.
Like diverse races and cultures and stuff?
Well, it depends what you're going to do. If you're going to do healthcare in Cleveland, no. If you're going to do healthcare in Europe, yes. In other words, you're in Belgium, and Belgium's not really big enough. I mean, then you're going to have but I mean, most Europe is white. We got from there's white, the Viking white, but to the English and the Spanish and the French, and if you want to consider French white, but I'm being sarcastic now, but it depends. But I mean, if you're, for example, if you go to some African country, other than South Africa, which I'm not recommending, although we have people in Ethiopia, etc. I mean, a good portion of, at least 50% of your board is going to be black if you're in the African continent. But you'll have white from the African continent, and you'll have white from Britain. If you go to India, 50% of your board is going to be Indian, of some Indian extraction. When you go to the Indonesia, Kuala Lumpur, that area, you're going to have mostly Asians, but you're going to have white people. Thanks, YouTube. But like Deb says, he's